and welcome to the March 2026 episode of the Allison Supply Chains podcast. Every month, this podcast covers the latest news concerning third-party security posture management and digital supply chain risk. We pick a few of the industry's most interesting stories and discuss them. This podcast accompanies the very popular Allison Supply Chains newsletter, which covers a lot more ground. If you like what you hear in this podcast, you can join over 15,500 subscribers and read the Allison Supply Chains newsletter every month. To subscribe to that, you can go to tenchysecurity.com, click on Insights and News along the top, and then Allison Supply Chains newsletter. It'll take you right there on LinkedIn. Also, if you're listening to this, why not subscribe to the podcast? You're already here. The button's right down here somewhere. Just click it. We'd also love to hear your feedback, so leaving comments is great. Let us know what you want to hear. If there's any other special guests you would like us to chat with, leave us a review and let us know what you think. All right, let's get the show started. I'm your host, Adrian Sanabria, founder of the Defenders Initiative, and joining me is Alexandre Sieira, the CTO and co-founder of Tenchy Security. How are you doing, Alex?
I'm great. Now that the second deadline to deliver the RSA talk is behind me, I feel very relieved. I assume you are as well.
The second, I thought the second deadline wasn't until next Wednesday.
Okay. Well, actually, it's probably per speaker. Like we deliver our first one, and then they gave us notes and said you have to deliver the changes by this date. Yeah. I can imagine it's kind of a per speaker thing. It's not a global thing. But so you probably got
I'm going to be checking on that.
You're a better negotiator than I am. You had a more lenient deadline. That's great. Good on
you. Maybe. I'm not 100% sure. So I'm going to be checking on that as soon as we're done here. They have been pestering me for it, but I thought I still had time. I'm really looking forward to mine, though. But I had an intro that was probably too long, so I'm trying to figure out what to replace that intro with. Mm-hmm. All right. So yeah, that could kind of be my vibe section right there. That's I actually have like 7 PowerPoints open right now because I'm pulling stuff from old presentations, and very focused on that. Also, I hired an employee. I now have one employee at the Defenders Initiative, and I have them going through breach reports, pulling out control failures, interesting stuff, and helping me with that research because there's just never enough time in the day for me to go and do that. So I'm excited about it. It's he's going to be publishing under his own name on my Substack when we start publishing these. Basically postmortems, lessons learned from breaches. I think there's a lot of stuff out there that people haven't learned from. That's buried in legal reports. FTC complaints are a great place to find them. Sometimes they get released as part of class action lawsuits. And then sometimes companies just share the details and the journalists don't notice. Nobody notices. It's just sitting out there.
So you hired an actual human to do work for you? I mean, how quaint. I mean, haven't you heard the new coolness
the time of
AI, AI agents? They're replacing humans left and right, or so I hear.
Almost every reaction I got is like, "That's weird. Why don't you just use AI?"
No, that's awesome, man. That's great. I'm super happy for you, and it makes perfect sense. Of course, you're going to get the human to use AI when it makes sense, but nothing replaces having a human that has common sense and judgment. And can double check things, and that's awesome.
Yeah, 5 years from now, people are going to be complaining like, why is there no pipeline for security people? And it's because there was this period of 3 years where everyone was convinced that they were going to offload everything to AI. So we'll see how that goes. That's my prediction. People are going to be complaining even more than they do today about the market for hiring security professionals. Mm-hmm. All right. On your side, any vibes to share there?
No, that's pretty much it. I mean, RSA is coming up. Tenchy is going to have the Tenchy Lounge there. So we are closing from Sunday to Wednesday, a place called Harlan Records, a couple blocks away from Union Square. an amazing upscale bar. I'm going to have live shows, so parties every night that people can register to. So just go to the tenchysecurity.com page. Under company, you see events, and then you can see there the Tenchi Lounge, and you can apply. Of course, it will be a lot of Latin American folks there. So lots of CISOs from companies from Brazil, from Mexico, from Chile, from Peru already signed up. We'd be happy to see everyone there that's interested in just hanging out with fellow security practitioners and talking TPCRM or TPRM will be most welcome.
Awesome. Yeah, I plan on stopping by at some point. All right. Let's jump into the first story. First story here, cyber risk at scale, safeguarding portfolio value in private equity. So this is a report from Kroll, Kroll. I think that I'm assuming that's how you say it. And very interesting, for a long time, I've kind of pushed back on there's a bunch of myths about cybersecurity out there. One of them is that it's costing the industry like $12 trillion a year, something like that. Numbers that just absolutely cannot be defended or justified. And along with that, I think it leads to the myth that cybersecurity should be every company's top priority, right? It should be the most important thing to them. And based on what we've seen, it's much riskier to not have more risk, right? Like the companies that are too conservative, much more, really hung up on security, much more likely to go out of business because you're not keeping up with your competition than companies that even ignore security completely, right? Like we very rarely see companies go out of business because of security. So what I'm excited about with this report is now like this quantifies some of it. We get some information on, this is how important cybersecurity is in context of other risks that they have for private equity companies and their portfolios.
And I think Kroll is uniquely positioned to this. Not that they are the only companies doing that, but they're very well known and respected in the market for doing investigations of all sorts, including like human investigation, like following people, trying to find people that might be committing fraud, like insiders, so that you can later either sue them or like generate evidence to support like legal action or management decisions. But they also do a lot of incident response and digital forensics. And they are also involved in cybersecurity claims, investigations, and M&A due diligence from what I hear from them. So they probably work a lot with private equity companies when they're doing due diligence before private equity companies invest or buy other companies, and also even when they have cybersecurity incidents. So the thing that ties to what you just said is they interviewed a big number of private equity firms and were investigating what is the true economic impact of cybersecurity in your portfolio. Because it's very easy for people to equate third-party cyber risk management to vendor risk management. But I keep needing to remind people when I talk to them that it's so much more than that. Like if you depending on who you are, your third party that you need to be concerned about could be your customer. Like if you're a credit card acquiring bank, for example, right, an acquirer. Because if your customer, which is the merchant, has an incident, you are liable to the credit card brand for that because you are bringing that customer into the credit card network. A sales channel, like if you're an insurance company and your insurance broker gets breached, PII leaks, now you're liable for that under privacy legislation. And private equity is another interesting scenario, or just big conglomerates when companies buy other companies. So if you're invested, you have a sizable portion or 100% of a company, but you keep them at arm's length, which is very typical of private equity. Like the companies they invested in have their own independent management, including their own cybersecurity teams, right? So if they get breached, your shareholder value is going to be hurt, right? They're not going to be able to sell for as much. Their operations might be hurt. So it's another TPCRM scenario, right? It's not customer vendor. It's investor owner, and portfolio company. But it's the exact same techniques can and should be used. Only probably as a partial owner or total owner, you have a lot more leverage over the portfolio company than a typical customer has with a vendor, right? So it's actually even better. And the findings here are super interesting, as you said, and you did tremendous notes here. I'm not going to steal your thunder and let you go over them, but this is why we're talking about this. This is just another case of TPCRM, just in a different use case. Most people don't think about.
Yeah, so I want to add some context around this report. So the data is from a survey. From what I can tell, it was 325 executives, private equity executives, and from the USA, UK, Ireland, Australia, Germany, Switzerland, Singapore, and Japan. And USA was the largest represented there. So it's kind of in order of representation. I think at the smallest end, it was a dozen people from Singapore and Japan. So it narrows down to that size. But decent sample size. And they ask questions both about how the portfolios are managed, cybersecurity for the portfolios after the companies have been acquired, but also the process of acquiring the companies, of those companies exiting to the portfolio. And I think that's where some of the most interesting details are, because we've got some numbers on actual losses due to cybersecurity incidents. So the TLDR here is, they lost value out of the company. There was, they got, I think the famous case is Yahoo or AOL. Yahoo owned a bunch of stuff being acquired by Verizon, was it? And
so
they
I know the Yahoo
breach,
story,
and
because Yahoo was the last acquisition Verizon did before acquiring my previous company, Needle.
very similar acquisitions.
Deal sizes, slightly different deal sizes. We were an early stage bootstrap company with 6 people, right? So yeah, but it was after
they found
Verizon
out
acquired
about the breach.
So
the
they
deal
had
sizes
already
were a little closer.
Yeah, so I think they had already acquired Yahoo, and then the breach came up, which is interesting timing, like a few months later. And then Verizon ended up reselling Yahoo for a fraction of the price that they paid, right? Which was already like much lower than what Yahoo was once, valued as when they, yeah. So it was like losses, financial losses all around. And you're talking about the losses here. I think the thing that struck me the most is more than a quarter of PE firms suffered reduced valuation or exit price due to cybersecurity risk. Because again, if you don't understand how private equity firms operate, they buy typically a controlling share on a company, or at least enough of a stake on a company to be able to influence the way it's managed. And what they're betting on, in theory, is they're going to come in and help either fund the company so they can do changes in the way they operate, or they're going to help manage the company, change the way the company is managed so that it's worth more. So I buy it for 10, I sell it, 4 or 5 years later for 50, because the money I put into it, sometimes from debt, but still the money I put into it and changes I did, like cost cutting, efficiencies, better management techniques, leads to them being worth more at the end. And that's how the private equity fund makes a return. And if because of cybersecurity incidents, the exit price, so the price that they eventually sell that company for, is less than it could be, I mean, that's not ideal, right? It's like hurting a company's revenue, essentially. It's hurting the bottom line. So this is why this has become an interesting topic for them.
Yeah. So the numbers here: the average financial impact was 2.1 million due to cybersecurity incidents, and scales up to $10 million in some cases. And generally, they say that the larger firms being acquired were handling it well, and the smaller ones not so much. So that's where we see a lot of deal disruption during the transaction. Yeah, I imagine that's like the worst case scenario. Like you're in the middle of trying to sell your company, and boom, you get hit with a breach, right? Like
Yeah.
I remember that happened to Drizzly. Like there's a bunch of cases, bunch of public examples we could bring up where that's happened in the middle of negotiations, and that's just, you do not want that in the middle of negotiations.
No, you do not. You can tank a deal. Absolutely.
So some more stats here. 9 out of 10 respondents experienced some financial impact due to cyber risk. 44% experienced unexpected cyber incident remediation costs during the hold period. And I'm not super familiar with the PE process or
So,
what that hold period is.
so you have the M&A period where the PE firm is acquiring a portfolio company. Then they hold it, and that's where they want to improve the efficiency or increase the value of the
Oh,
company,
okay.
and
So
then they
that's
sell it, and
after
that's the
they exit.
exit.
Okay.
No,
Okay. They're calling that the hold period.
Between when they buy it, but before they're able to sell it. So, which is
Yeah.
the longest amount of time. Like if you're
Yeah.
the entire time the PE was involved with the company is 5 years, it probably took 6 months to buy it, another 6 months to sell it, and the whole period is the stuff in the middle, which is 4 years out of the five in this hypothetical example I just came up with. So it doesn't surprise me that cybersecurity risk is more disruptive during the whole period, just because probabilities. That's where it's more likely to, for instance, to occur.
Yeah. So 44% experience unexpected remediation costs, but 27% experience business disruptions in that whole period due to cyber incidents. And one thing I felt was interesting here, and one other stat, 12% chance of a deal being disrupted in the exit period. So while they're doing the negotiations, which 12% sounds low, but like 1 in 10, like that's a lot of deals disrupted.
Mm-hmm.
And the stats I found really interesting because I know security folks who have these roles where they're kind of CISO for all the portfolio companies, or they have some, like Trey Ford was in a role like this
I
for
was
Vista
thinking
Equity
about him.
for
Yeah.
for a while. But 82% of PE firms have no dedicated cybersecurity leader, and 85% of firms had no security team in place. I found that kind of surprising.
Yeah. And they mentioned in the report that the larger private equity firms, the ones that have the biggest assets under management, which are, I think, are the ones that are most likely to have cybersecurity teams that will support the cybersecurity practice and oversee the cybersecurity practice of the portfolio companies, were the ones that experienced proportionally less losses. Again, I'm not surprised. If you have people doing the work of risk management, risk will be managed better, right? It's shocker.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I do some work for a portfolio company for a PE firm, and once a month they have on Fridays they have a security chat, and someone from representing each portfolio company has to come to those, and they've had me speak at a number of these monthly cybersecurity lunch and learns. I don't know what they call it internally, but but yeah, that's kind of why it surprises me. Is I know a bunch of people who've worked in this role, and I've done some work for folks in this role, so I'm surprised it's as high as over 80%.
Yeah. Yeah, it is.
All right, I think we should move on to the next one because we're going to need some time here.
Yes,
this
that one is juicy.
So story number 2, Gartner put out a report that so it's called Gartner Predicts TPCRM Evolves for the AI Era, and boy does it have some juicy insights and notes and findings in it.
Brace yourselves. We're about to agree heavily with Gartner, which is
Rarely
new.
do you see Alex type something in all caps, and he did in this case when he shared this report.
Yes, this was a cool one. Yeah. So this is new research. Do we want to mention the name of the document? So this is a customer only. It's not public, this content. So we have to be rather careful about not quoting excerpts from the document. So we're going to be discussing our opinions about what we heard, which might be right or wrong. I recommend everyone that is a Gartner customer, and all kidding aside, we respect Gartner. Some analysts do amazing work, some not so much. But overall, I think it's a great company to work with. We are customers. But the name of the document is Predicts 2026, Third-Party Cybersecurity Risk Management Evolves for the AI Era. And it was written by Oscar Isaaca, fellow Brazilian, Deepti Gopal, I hope I'm saying this right, and Zachary Smith. So anyway, on to the summary. But it's great read. If you're anywhere near, if you're within a mile of working in TPRM and TPCRM, stop what you're doing and read this document.
And it's 11 pages. It's a pretty quick read. It's not super weighed down by anything. There's not really any wasted space in it. So I do like reports like that.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And so basically, again, like the TLDR here is that they're seeing a market shift. So this is kind of half prediction in this report and half observation of what they see customers asking for. So they see customers asking for GRC and TPCRM solutions combined in a single product. And they're also seeing, and I think for a lot of people, this is going to be kind of like a duh, like this is pretty obvious. But TPCRM programs are over-reliant on due diligence tasks. So filling out questionnaires, asking for somebody's SOC 2, proceeding not to read it. Things that we've talked about quite a bit on this podcast. And
yes.
The language, I think, is very interesting in this report. They say it's an illusion that pre-contract activities are sufficient to manage cyber risks. And that's kind of a mic drop statement.
A freaking man to that, because that's
that's why your company exists, right? So
right?
A little bit of a advertisement.
And to be frank, I'm talking to TPCRM people because of what we do, like every day, or to CISOs almost every day. And the conversations go a little bit like this. What we're doing is not working, right? And they say, yeah, right. Like they grudgingly agree. Like the people doing the work understand that a lot of it is performative, but it's what was agreed they needed to do to check the box. And when the financial authority auditor comes along, they say, yeah, we're doing the due diligence on our third parties, right? But if you look at any stat on the growth of incidents involving third parties, we know what we're doing is not working. And I was seeing a lot of research, sensible research from Gartner. For example, they had big research last year talking about how instead of using your own bespoke questionnaires, you should standardize on standard questionnaire questions to make the process more efficient, but failing to address what they finally address here. The whole thing about using questionnaires is kind of pointless. Besides the idea of I'm generating evidence that I'm doing something to meet the compliance requirement if you're in a regulated industry, but that's it. And some enterprising TPCRM analysts will find a problem maybe once in a blue moon and feel good about this. And I'm glad you're doing it, but the amount of time and effort and money being spent on this does not justify the very few findings and benefits that are coming out of this. And it's great to read that on the page, finally, from Gartner. Hopefully that helps move the needle a little bit.
So Alex, how much ROI do you think you get from increasing the efficiency of a process that produces no value?
You're going to be driving much faster towards the same wrong destination, yes. And I want to say something else. Like in a previous episode, I went to a Gartner CTO focused event. You're going to recall I coined the term thought leadership malpractice because I saw a Gartner analyst on stage saying something to the effect of like kids don't even need a formal education anymore. They just need an AI bootcamp because AI knows the facts and just operate AI. I'm not going to relitigate that. But I'm finally seeing Gartner itself, I think, starting to go on the trough of disillusionment for AI. And there are two things. There's one that I saw on another report, recent report, and the stuff we see on this one. So on another report, I saw Gartner saying nice things about a company, saying that they had a pragmatic approach to product innovation because it intentionally incorporates AI functionality versus attempting to add AI to every aspect of the product. So this is a diss of companies just doing AI everywhere, just ramming AI down users' throats, whether it makes sense or not. But they did it in a very classy way, like saying good things about the companies that are not doing that, instead of dissing the ones that are, because they're all Gartner customers, right? So they don't want to diss their customers. But I'm glad. This is good news. This is them reminding their customers, their end user customers, that the AI is a means to an end. It has to make sense. It has to be tied to an application where AI is a valuable solution. It's adding value. It's not AI for AI's sake, right? And this report that we're mentioning today about TPCRM kind of goes even beyond that. We talked about on this podcast a few times how there are vendors there in the TPCRM space saying it's going to be fully autonomous TPCRM. The AI agents are going to do everything, and we're going to have agents talking to agents. We have people automating third parties automating the responses on the questionnaires. You have agents automating the review of those questions. And they explicitly warn of a TPCRM slop apocalypse, like AI slop bringing the apocalypse. They're saying that at some point, most organizations and first parties and third parties are going to be using Gen AI to complete and review the questionnaires, rendering the outputs increasingly unusable and disconnected from actual risk indicators. That's strong language right there. Right. And finally, before I go ahead.
Yeah, it's just, we can see the logical end here, right? Like this should be obvious to everyone, but I think the thing is people believe that there's still value in, being able to say that they've done this, being able to point to this and say, look, due diligence was done, I don't know, maybe on a class action that saves you $500,000 in the suit or something like that, or, reduces something. Maybe I haven't seen any data suggesting that, but eventually we're going to see data that says, these AIs like creating and answering, in this closed loop of due diligence, just has zero impact on anything financial.
I think it has zero impact on the actual risk related to security breaches or incidents. It might have some minor benefits, and I don't know the word for this in English, but there's a word in legalese which would roughly translate to dosimetry, which is when you are fined or when you are punished, either from a regulatory body or from like the judicial system, you could do things that diminish the size of that fine or that punishment, right? So for example, let's say I'm going to get a privacy fine, but if I did at least a few things, then maybe the privacy regulator is going to go easy on my fine. It's not going to go to the max allowed, right? So the way I see this when I talk to people is, okay, like if I include a contractual clause to my vendor where they claim that they are following privacy best practices, and if I at least sent them a questionnaire, they replied and I reviewed it, I could tell a judge or I could tell the privacy regulator, like I was doing something. I wasn't completely negligent here. And maybe that doesn't stop me being fined.
Negligence is the word that you would hear used for not doing these expected things.
So it's the bare minimum, and the advantage is I might be fined regardless, but I'm going to be fined less, like a lower percentage of my revenue or something, because that's how privacy fines are defined typically. So that's something else that's I think that's what people are thinking. But finally, Gartner is coming out and saying it. Like, this will not help you mitigate risk, right? They explicitly say that questionnaires are point-in-time assessment and not a reliable proxy for third-party cybersecurity risk. Again, questionnaires are not properly assessing if your third party is secure. It's not a good assessment. You're not actually measuring how secure a third party is, which is the purported goal of questionnaires. Because they're asking, do you do this? Do you do that? Do you have that control? It doesn't work as an assessment tool, as an assurance tool. It just doesn't work. And finally, Gartner, after providing a lot of content on how you should use questionnaires, right? Yeah. Finally, they're coming out and speaking the ugly truth. It's not. It's just not. So I find that refreshing.
I think this is a natural thing in cybersecurity. I'm seeing the same thing in vulnerability management where like nuclear security we talked about in the podcast the other day is Kenna got shut down by Cisco. Nucleus was a competitor to Kenna in the risk-based vulnerability management space. And they just raised a down round. Their C round was smaller than their B round. And I think that's something we're seeing as well where, risk-based vulnerability management makes you feel like you're getting something done, like you're getting somewhere. But it's either not doing enough for what you pay for it, that, the market is just not taking off. It's not something that everybody's purchasing. And, sometimes we get it wrong. We see this a lot where especially, some of these practices that started decades ago, we didn't know the right way to do it. So we did some guessing. Questionnaires seemed reasonable. But now that we have more and more data on what works and what doesn't work, because we have so many breaches, I think we are hitting a time where people are willing to jettison things and, take their budgets, take their people and rearrange them and try and have them focus on things that are more useful. And the other thing I'm interested about here, I wonder if cybersecurity eventually gets to the point where fraud is. Like, nobody in fraud talks about eliminating all fraud, right? They accept that some amount of shrink, some amount of scams and fraud will happen to their business, depending on the type of business. So they seek to minimize it. Here we're talking about, does this minimize the fines? Does this minimize what, how much we get sued or how much we get sued for? Mm-hmm. And I wonder if we do get to that point where we find, look, stopping breaches altogether, like it's possible, but we don't have that kind of money, right? Only a certain amount of spending, certain amount of staffing, certain amount of locking down the business, which introduces friction, makes it harder to compete, makes it harder to eats into revenue. I wonder if we do get to a point to where it just becomes accepted that we're going to try and minimize the impact of breaches, but they're gonna just keep happening.
They explicitly mentioned that, actually. So this report.
Oh, did they? Okay.
They do. They mentioned that what CISO should be doing instead, my words, not theirs, I'm paraphrasing here, summarizing, is you should focus on continuous monitoring. You should focus on being ready from when an incident occurs to handle it well in a coordinated fashion with at least your critical third parties, so that you recover faster and mitigate risk, instead of spending a lot of time on the assessment alone. Again, this is what we've been telling folks all along. You need to have a cooperative approach, and you need to work with third parties focused on risk visibility, of course, but risk mitigation, risk reduction, right? Which is and it involves things on your side, like how much access do I give the third party? What data do I share with the third party? How integrated is my IR and business continuity process with my critical third parties IR and business continuity practices? Like, today, very few blue teams from first parties even know about who the third parties are or have contact information for the third parties to know what to do when an incident occurs, right? So that sort of thing is where a lot of the value is. That's going to bring the biggest savings, much less than doing questionnaires, right? And they mentioned the continuous monitoring because that's the thing that's going to help you either prevent problems or detect problems and act upon them quickly, which is what we're doing 90% of the time in cybersecurity. I just wanted to say something else about the questionnaires because the AI stuff. So they mentioned both problems with questionnaires. I think it's the only analyst report I've seen, or the only thing outside of what we screen on top of our soapboxes that addresses both the quality of the data, like the questionnaire, even if it works well, it's point in time and it's not assessing the third-party security correctly. So they say that. And it's also telling us that Gen AI, if you use Gen AI to both reply to the questionnaires and review the responses, it's going to lead to model collapse. It's going to have hallucinations, degradation, error amplifications, like a microphone feedback. Like this dream, and we talked about this on past podcast episodes, they explicitly mention it there. So they're pointing the way, continuous monitoring, focus on actual security controls. They explicitly mention inside-out monitoring, looking at IAM and internal security posture. Mind blown. Again, if only there was a company that was talking about this since 2019 and had implemented a product to do just that.
So
anyway,
again, having a background as a PCI QSA, one of the things you learn very, very quickly is that what people think is happening is not what's actually happening. And so this questionnaire isn't even sharing things based on data in a lot of cases for a lot of these questions. It's the perception of what people think that they're doing, right? And over when I study breaches, I see the same thing where people are saying, I thought we had this locked down. I thought that server was taken offline years ago. I thought we had MFA across all users. I had forgotten or didn't realize one department was accepted from an exception from doing that. And just over and over, like cardholder data shouldn't exist outside this. We go look for it. Absolutely it does. It's all over the place, right? And it's so these questionnaires aren't even just point in time, but they're the idea of how security works in an organization that's often incorrect and does not match up with reality.
And it's easy to beat a dead horse. So they of course mention the complete bankruptcy of questionnaires, but they also don't hold back on security scoring solutions. And they mention that the traditional, outside-in security scores are inadequate for modern TPCRM programs. Again, what they're saying here is what we've been telling everyone, and the reason why we built
They're not telling you not to do it. They're telling you to expand, right?
The wording is it's inadequate. Inadequate, right? I might have pronounced that weirdly. So it's inadequate, meaning, and now it's my opinion, not the report. This is what they say, it's inadequate, right? And the reason why I also believe this is because it's giving people a false sense of security. So I don't think we've ever published this anywhere, but we're working on it. We have both outside in and inside out, and we can calculate 2 scores for each third party on our platform, right? And I'm sorry, I'm going to talk a little bit about Tenchi's product, and we typically don't do this, but I need to explain this to explain.
It's relevant.
It's relevant. So we have the outside in scores only. So let's assume I could only see the outside in stuff, which is what every other security scoring company out there sees. That's where they stop, right? External attack surface, threat intelligence data that's external, because they are not connecting to the APIs of the infrastructure of that third party like we are and their security products. And then we also calculate for those same companies the complete score that includes both outside in and inside out stuffs, where we're going into Azure AD and checking if every user has 2FA. We're going into AWS and if they have public S3 buckets or databases exposed to in the internet, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what we find consistently is that outside-in scoring is grossly overestimating how secure companies are. Like grossly. The vast majority of third parties are either A's or B's. I think like 89% of companies on the outside in are either A's or B's.
Yeah.
And when you look at include the inside out, that drops precipitously. Like the average goes more towards C's and D's. Which do you think, Adrian, better represents the average security of a supplier of a large company?
Yeah,
do you think everyone just doing super well, and that's why we don't see many breaches involving third parties? Oh, wait, not really. Like, I think it's something on the order of 75% of companies that are an A, when you look just at outside in, are no longer an A when you include inside out. 30% of them become D's or F's, right? So a third of your third parties.
They don't go from A to
D's
B.
or
they
F
go from A
to D's or
straight
F's.
to the bottom. Yeah.
So a third of the companies in fact had outstanding security. It is.
In a lot of cases, that's how it's incentivized. It's incentivized to polish the outside of the car. The paint's really good on the outside, but the engine doesn't run, and the seats are falling apart. And like once you go on the inside, to use a car analogy here, there is the concept of a 20-foot car. It's a term you sometimes hear, like it might be 10 foot, 30 foot. It's like if you stand far enough away, the car looks amazing, but the closer you get to it, then you start to see all the flaws. You start to see all the problems.
Yes. And if you open the hood, you pop the hood, and then you're going to see a lot more interesting stuff. So anyway, I think we've made.
Now you can see all the rust.
Right? Or the places where it was hit and then it was buffed up again, out again, and etc.
Exactly. The Bondo, the filler.
So I think this is super refreshing. Again, I think we should move on to the next story by now. But like they're saying the quiet part out loud finally, right? So, and Gartner is late to the game, so the timing is what we've been feeling as well. That our message is being much more accepted, and I'm super glad. Everyone should read this report and reflect on it.
Yeah, it's again, to bookend what I said at the beginning. It sounds obvious, but when Gartner, who tends to be very kind of conservative with what they predict and proclaim, when Gartner's saying it, it's time.
Wasn't obvious in 2019. I can tell you that.
Yeah. Well, people just couldn't even imagine another way of doing it, right? And some people still can't, So I think it's time for them to help them imagine a better way, a brighter future.
Yeah.
This episode is brought to you by Zanshin, the innovative SaaS solution for third-party cyber risk management that's disrupting the market with a cooperative, continuous, and comprehensive approach. Zanshin is the only solution that combines outside-in with inside-out visibility through authorized, non-intrusive read-only checks, so you can validate security posture beyond what's visible from the internet. Get an A to F security score refreshed every 6 hours based on the severity, how long issues stay open, and whether findings recur or spread across assets. Visit tenchisecurity.com to schedule a demo. All right, so story number 3. So this story came from me because this is one of the breaches I'm doing a lot of analysis on, which is the PowerSchool breach. And as is typical, when you get deep insight into a breach, it usually comes years after the actual breach occurred. So the privacy commissioners in Canada for each province, basically, if you want to do business in Canada and you have a breach that impacts a lot of its population, privacy commissioners have the right to investigate you. And then they're going to make that investigation public, which is amazing for people like me who try to learn more about breaches and the lessons we should be learning from them.
Wait,
so the
governments can investigate companies and check them and make sure they follow legislation?
I don't understand why we don't do this more in the U.S., right? Yeah.
Our privacy legislator in Brazil is also largely absent, unfortunately. It's much less active than it should be, even though the law is in place. So we have this saying in Portuguese that it makes more sense in Portuguese, that a lei é cumprida, mas não é cumprida. Cumprida, it's long, but cumprida is enforced. So it's long, but it's not enforced. So it's what we see here. But so that's me complaining about us as well. So I'm not beating up the US specifically in this case. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, I like that we have an example here, right? This is something I'm going to be talking about in my RSA talk. Like, here's an example of how this could work, right? Like, not everybody has to put together a big report and share all their breach details, but when it's egregious, when it's bad, the government should be able to step in and say, we're going to make a public example here. We're going to investigate this. There's lessons that everyone can learn here that will better everyone from having learned them. So the PowerSchool breach, PowerSchool makes software for schools. So this is where your grades go. Teachers can assign things. So there's data from students in here. There's data from the actual staff of the schools, the teachers and staff there. And they had a breach, and the TLDR of the breach is that a contractor had access to all, and this goes into their software's architecture, right? Like a single contractor account with just a single username and password, no MFA, was able to log into all instances, regardless of whether you're using PowerSchool's hosting product, their PowerSchool Cloud, or I forget exactly what they call the product, but they'll host it for you, or you can host it yourself. In both cases, all instances were accessible with this username and password, because even if you host yourself, you're encouraged to expose that and allow PowerSchool employees to log in so that they can provide support and they can help you if you run into issues, which, most schools not having as much IT spending on IT as they would like. I'm sure that's something they're looking for in a third party, is some, active assistance in support. And when this breach happened, they didn't get a whole lot of support from PowerBreach. So there's even there's a Google Doc that's still out there, where, because PowerSchool was trying to keep everything quiet, they paid the ransom. They told everybody, like, their data was fine. It wasn't, they paid the ransom, so everything's good. But schools were still individually getting hit up for ransoms because of that.
So you're data. Telling me that criminals didn't honor their word? And
I'm sure PowerSchool was shocked. I'm sure we're all as shocked as PowerSchool was that this happened. Yes. So customers banded together and pulled together information on the breach, and how to fix the problem, how to close down the vulnerability, and what data was taken, where it was being, the attacker's IP address, where it was coming from. And it turns out the attacker was a 17-year-old. So they were discovered, arrested. I forget what sentencing was, but it was 17 or 19-year-old. But unsurprising, young person that was exposed to the system a lot, and probably used it when he was a student. But yeah, so that's the TLDR of how the breach happened. And, now a couple of years later, maybe a year and a half later, I forget the exact timeline, we have the privacy commissioners from Ontario and Alberta, each independently doing their own investigations and independently releasing their own very thorough reports. So these are reports that the average person probably wouldn't want to read. So I will be publishing a summary of this soon with all the lessons to be learned. But one of the most interesting things to me here was that privacy commissioners put a lot of the blame on the schools themselves for not holding PowerSchool to, higher standards, to what it said in their SOC 2, not validating that they're actually doing what they said they would do, which I think is kind of surprising, because schools generally don't have the resources to do that. So I think it was a little harsh, but on the other side, I think it's like, that's the trend I want to see. I think that should be the expectation. You can't assume people are going to, in fact, I think it's safer to assume they're not going to do what it says in their SOC 2 or what they promise on the webpage.
I think it's natural for a privacy regulator or investigator to think this way because starting with GDPR all the way to Brazilian LGPD, I'm not super familiar with Canadian law, but I have to assume they followed in the steps of GDPR same way that Brazil did and most countries did. It's baked into privacy regulation, the concept of a controller and a processor. So if you are a student, you are entrusting your personal data to the school. If the school chooses to then share that information with a vendor, with a partner, with a sales channel, with whomever, they are co-liable. They need to ensure it's their responsibility to ensure that that data that they chose, because they could have kept this internally and not hired PowerSchool or not given PowerSchool IT, like remote access that would lead them to getting access to the PII, right? They made a conscious choice of doing that. They could have bought some other system that was fully on-prem with no remote assistance option, right? Where the vendor could never impact the privacy of that data, right? So it's incumbent on them by law to ensure that whenever they are either giving access or actually sharing PII with another entity, that they make sure that that entity is also protecting that data adequately. So it's absolutely natural that a privacy commissioner would think that way. It's what's enshrined in law. Right, so that's the thing. So TPCRM is mandatory as far as privacy is concerned, and it goes beyond just security. By the way, it covers privacy-specific things like consent management or having a due cause to be able to process that data, which might involve consent or might involve other exceptions. So. This is natural. It's incumbent on the first party to do this, and they failed. And that's what the Privacy Commissioner is saying. Makes perfect sense to me.
You could say they failed, or you could say that they didn't do their homework, right? I think that's the easy joke.
Would you say that they needed to be educated on proper TPCRM management? Or that, like their math homework assignments, their TPCRM processes had too many problems?
And the privacy commissioners were that spicy in the report. There were references worded exactly like that in the report. So I like that they were kind of spicy with it, because it's I think it emphasizes the findings here. That you kind of have to practice what you preach here, which schools should be doing.
Absolutely. They didn't even have the basic, but they didn't have security clauses in the contract. So because we just talked about, you have to do the basics to at least diminish the amount of punishment or pushback you're going to get from the regulator. It's not even that they didn't have continuous monitoring of the security of PowerSchool. They didn't even have contractual clauses requiring PowerSchool to properly protect the data or to use a minimum level of security. Again, that might be considered, allegedly, whatever doesn't get me sued, close to being negligent.
Yeah. And even AI would tell you that you need that in your contracts if you asked it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Yeah, so there's a lot more details for that breach. Look for that when I publish that to my Substack, Defenders Initiative Substack, and yeah. Any final thoughts before we wrap up here?
No, that's it. It's not usual that we see that much detail published on a third-party related breach. So I think it's an opportunity, as you said, for our listeners to dive deep and understand and think where and if they're making some of the same mistakes that school system made, and how do you avoid it? How do you improve your TPCRM program and your risk management in general, learning the lessons from that breach, because everyone there was probably working alongside their financial incentives and doing the best they could under the conditions they were in, but learn from it so you don't repeat their mistakes.
Yeah, amen. All right, that's all we've got for this episode of Alice in Supply Chains. Alex, thank you so much for joining me today. This was a lot of fun.
It was. Till next time.
If you liked what you heard and you're on a platform where you can like, subscribe, or leave a comment, we love those comments. Please do so. We'd love to get your feedback. Stay safe and stay vigilant, and we'll see you again next month.